In last week's episode, we continued planking the hull. Then Johan drove to pick up some Swedish cedar and visited the forest where it used to grow.
Here we have them. I think, yes. Look. This is just so cool. So yesterday I mounted the last of the strips that we had of the Canadian cedar. So the rest of the surface here up on the hull, or down on the hull, the bottom part, we will use the Swedish cedar for that, that I picked up the other day. But before we start working with that, I thought it was time to start working on the recess where the keel plate is going to sit later on. And that's why I have mounted these two strips that represent the width of that area where we're going to have a recess. And there is not going to be any wood or timber in here, just solid glass where the keel bolts will go through the hull. So what I'm doing now with the router is that I'm using this sled with these oak planks that are very rigid to knock off the curvature in the temporary frames. Since this 20mm thick stainless steel plate will only be bent in this direction and not in that direction, because that would have been pretty hard on a thick plate like that. We're going to knock off the top here. So we have a flat area here, but we still have the height differences between these, so we still follow the curvature of the hull in that direction lengthwise. So I'm using this sled that rides on top of what's going to be the future hull. And that way I know that we follow the curvature of the hull because it's riding on the hull. Of course, there is some deflection in this, but I made it from oak, so it's very stiff. So it's definitely within what's tolerated. So as you can see, the keel will have a really big surface area as a connection point to the hull. It's 0.5 meter wide, 5 meters long, and that plate will, like I said, it will be 20mm thick. So really sturdy. And also the keel bolts will sit as wide apart as possible. And then the actual keel will be welded on to that plate. These will stay in place. It will be like a frame around the recess. And then the planks on the side here will go up against this frame. I know that I maybe explained this a bit poorly in a past video, because a lot of people got the notion that we're going to laminate this big stainless steel plate into the hull, and that's not the case. We will make a recess in the hull where we will have solid glass, and then once it's time to put the hull on top of that keel, that really thick 20mm thick plate will go into the hull, into the recess that I'm making here now. And the reason we don't want to have any timber where the keel sits, it's because a solid glass laminate can take a lot more compression loads compared to a sandwich construction here with the timber in the middle. And also, if you have a leak around the keel bolt, you don't want that water to be able to reach the timber. So everywhere on the boat where there is a bolt going through the hull, in any case, in any location, we will have solid glass or at least epoxy around that bolt. So I've just finished using the router, making these flat spots on the temporary frames, and it turned out really good. I'm putting in this floor now with these thin planks that I put through the planer yesterday. I could have used plywood, but the local lumber yard didn't have any plywood in this thickness, so I decided to go with these simple spruce planks. This will not be a permanent part of the hull, so the quality doesn't really matter. I will just tape down this surface later on once I'm finished with the planking here, and that will be a base that we can laminate against. Since we're making a solid laminate here with solid glass, we need something to laminate against. So we tape this down, and then we'll use vacuum bagging for this Keel Recess area later on. And the reason we're taping it down is so the epoxy and the lamination doesn't stick to the wood. As you can see, I made the recess a bit more narrow up front. It's 316 millimeter wide up there, and going back to frame number 13, it's 516 millimeter back here. And the reason for that is because the radius of the hull is more tight up front, and if we would have done the same width on the recess the whole way, the flat spot we would have created with the router up there would have been pretty deep into the hull. So that's why we decided to do this instead. Will be a less pronounced flat spot on the hull this way. So this way we can create a 10 millimeter thick solid laminate here on top of the floor in the Keel Recess area. Later on, once the hull is turned over, we will make more reinforcement on the inside of the hull with a grid, and also make the actual solid laminate here a bit thicker, but from the inside. So I will continue putting in the rest of the planks here, and try to finish this today. And then tomorrow it's back to do some more ripping. I'm preparing some more strips of cedar so we can continue planking the rest of the hull here. But this turned out really good. I'm happy with this. So it's time to do what I'm hoping to be the last ripping and planing session to complete the hull, to get the last strips that we need. I have sorted out these 9 planks here. These are the planks with the least amount of knots in them. And I'm thinking this should be enough when we have ripped these into strips, should be enough to complete the hull. So I better get going. The nice thing here is that I only need to rip them in one direction now. The other planks we had to cut in or rip in 2 directions, but this time, since these planks are a bit over 50 millimeters thick, we can just rip them like this and then send them through the planer. We need around 300 meters of strip to complete the hull, and I'm hoping we can get that from this pile. There's a lot more planks lying around here from what I bought the other week, but these are the nicest ones, and that's what's going into the hull. The rest here has a lot of nuts in it, and that we will use for some other things here on the farm, and maybe some stuff on the boat that doesn't require strength. that was hopefully the last ripping and planing session for at least for a while. This should be enough to complete the hull. We have 528 meters of strips here now. And actually we only need a bit less than 300 to complete the hull, but I made a lot of extra just to be sure, since we're going to cut out the bad parts where we have some nuts in some of these strips. So next thing now is to cut a lot of door stoppers, make those scarf joints to make longer strips out of these, and then it's up climbing on the hull again.
Can you see our new little family member? Or maybe you should say farm member. That's our robot mower. Her name is Luba, and we installed her yesterday. Well, as you know, since we moved into the farm a year ago, we haven't had that much time for the actual farm and the garden and everything that's around our house. And I've had so many ideas and plans that I want to do, but we haven't had the time or the finances to pay someone to do everything that we wanted. And one thing that we really needed was a lawn mower. We haven't had any, but now we found this Luba, and it is so cool. It's like revolutionary that it just cuts the grass, and we don't have to do anything, and we just set everything up in the app, and we can choose areas and what to avoid and how short the grass should be and how often it should cut it. And the best thing is that it can cut the grass on the whole farm, because this one can do up to 5,000 square meters, and we have 5,500 including this little forest. So we're just gonna let Luba cut all the grass here. So as you can see here, the lawn in front of the house is looking so nice, or maybe a little dry, but it's short. And our ground here is quite uneven, but she can still handle it, which is really great. And she can do some slopes because she has quite big wheels and some feathering. The grass was so high, so we had to go with a normal lawn mower before. We could borrow one from our friends, and then she could start working. So yeah, as you can see here how high it was. So my plan for now is to cut the grass here on the slope, to cut it down to a height that the Luba can start working there. The weather is so warm today and sunny. Feels like summer returned. It's heavy. The grass is so high and the ground is super uneven. I'm not gonna do the whole slope today. It's over 1,000 square meters big, and then after I've cut the grass, I have to pick everything up little by little. From cutting grass to cruising the waters of Gothenburg, we went to visit our sailing friends, and they have now sold their boat Star and want to buy a smaller one. But in the meantime, they have this motorboat to go out with. We went for an evening cruise on the canals in central Gothenburg. The day after, we were going to visit a boat show 1 hour north of the city. We drove by the East India man ship, Gothenburg, which is a replica of the original from 1738. It was a cool but calm night, and it reminded me so much of when we were sailing and arrived to a new place at night. The smells were always so distinct. So here we are at the Öppet Varv boat show. The rain is pouring down, so we'll see how much we get to see today, because a lot of it is outside, like all the boats that you can go and look at. But right now we're standing inside of one of the Halbarasi's shipyard halls where they build Halbarasi boats. So behind me they have 6 or 7 boats that they're working on currently. Är det tråkigt, Vera? Regnar det mycket? It was very interesting to walk inside of Halbarasi's boat factory and see all of the stations where they make the parts for the boats. "180 people work here, and we got a little jealous of all the machines and tools." One of the boats that they are currently building is their 69-footer, the largest Halbarasi boat made. This is the first one, and we could walk around to see the progress of the build and what a job they're doing and what a boat this is going to be. It's still raining, but less than before. What a day.
It's been crazy.
Not the best weather for an open boat show. Yeah, it was a fun day.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it was a lot of rain.
Yeah. Finding some inspiration and...
Yeah, it was great to see some solutions and what we could do.
The next day the rain had finally stopped and the sun was out. As we were walking along the water, we got asked if we wanted to take this old wooden sailing ship for a row. Of course we said yes.
All right, people.
Yes!
So what we can do now, we can push these oars out.
We're going out rowing on a boat from 1928. It was built on the east coast of Sweden and used to belong to the military. It wasn't all that easy to sink the rowing, but we got the old lady to move. It's not allowed to sail on the river, but we got to use our muscles rowing. Later that day, Gothenburg was going to sea, and we stayed to see her head out and firing the cannons. This is one of the world's largest operating wooden sailing ships. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoy our videos, we would really appreciate your support by becoming a patron. See you next week.